Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav, and we'll be learning today Mitzvah Hashem Daf Kuf Lamed Zayin Amid Beis. A very exciting day because we're going to begin to learn Hilchos Chanukah. It's interesting timing. We're not that long post Chanukah, and now we're starting to learn Hilchos Chanukah in a way we wish it was the other way. It would have been nice to learn Hilchos Chanukah before Chanukah, but that's the schedule, so that's what we're going to be doing. Hopefully we'll get to do a little piece of Kuf Lamed Ches Amid Aleph as well to try and catch up, but I'll have to say that that's going to depend on my voice. Okay, so let's begin. Siman Tafresh Ayin Dvarim Ha'asurim V'Hamutarim B'Chanukah, those things which are prohibited and those things which are permissible on Chanukah Ubay Gibel Seifim, and here we have 3 Seifim. Says the Mechaber Sefalef B'Chafei B'Kislev, on the 25th day of Kislev, the Ramah now inserts the word Maschilin Shmainas Yemei Chanukah, begins the 8 days of Chanukah. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Katan Aleph, Maschilin Shmainas Yemei Chanukah, on the 25th day of Kislev, the 8 days of Chanukah begin. Says the Chavetz Chaim, he gives us a brief introduction to the story of Chanukah. Ki bebayis sheni, during the days of the second Beis Hamikdash, ki shamalchu malchei risha, when an evil government was governing us, and this is of course a reference to the Yevanim, gazru gezeiros al Yisrael, they passed decrees over the Yidden, ubitlu dasam, and they tried to be mavatal our religion, v'lo hinichu oisam la'asok b'Torah u'mitzvos, and they did not allow the Yidden to learn Torah and to practice the mitzvahs. Upashtu yadam, and they stretched out their hands b'mamoinam, against their money and their possessions, ubivnoi sehem, and against their daughters, and we'll see what's meant by that soon. V'nichdesu laheichal, and they also went into the Beis Hamikdash, upartzu by pirtzais, and they busted open openings in the walls of the Beis Hamikdash, v'timu hataharos, and they made tameh that which was supposed to be kept tahar. And of course, one of the reasons they were metame the taharis is with that they were trying to show that there is no such thing as tumah and tahara. What kind of primitive idea is this, that there's something which is tameh, there's something that's contaminated, and it's especially things that have to do with the natural physical world. You want to tell me that there's a tumah of a sheretz, there's a tumah of tameh meis, of a dead body? What do you mean? The human body is so elevated according to Greek culture. So they wanted to show that this idea of tumah and tahara, in their mind, chas v'chalila, in their mind was primitive nonsense. So they wanted to do away with these inyanim of tumah and tahara. This is also why they were partsu by pratzais, why they opened up things that were supposed to be closed. What does that mean? We know that there are places where we're on the Harabayas where only a Yid is allowed to go. Then there are places where only Kaihanim are allowed to be, places where only Leviim are allowed to be. There's only a certain area that Yisraelim are allowed to go. So everything is delineated. The Greeks came and they wanted to be mevatel all of these different types of borders. They wanted to say that there's no such thing. So basically anything that had to do with Kedusha, they wanted to do away with. V'tzar lahem liYisrael ma'od, they oppressed the Yidden greatly. V'tzar lahem liYisrael ma'od mipneihem, Klal Yisrael had tremendous tsar, tremendous aggravation because of them. Olachatzam lachatz gadol, and they oppressed the Yidden with great oppression. Ad sharichem aleim aleikav liseinu, until the Rabbeinu Shalom, the God of our forefathers, had mercy on us. Vayishiab, and he saved them miyadam, from their hands. V'yitzilam, he saved them from the Yevanim. V'gavru b'nei Chashmonai ha'kaihanim ha'gedolim, and the hands of the Chashmonaim, who descended from the Kaihanim Gedolim, there was Yochanan Kohen Gadol, his son Matisyahu, and onwards, their hands became strengthened, v'harogum, and they were able to kill out those who oppressed them, v'yishiu Yisrael miyadam, and they saved Klal Yisrael from their hands. V'chazra malchus liYisrael yeser al masayim shana, and the kingship, the rulership, returned to Klal Yisrael for a period of over 200 years, ad ha-Churban Hasheni, until the time of Churban Bayis Sheni. Ukeshagavru Yisrael al oivehem, when Klal Yisrael was able to become strengthened and they were able to become victorious over their oppressors, ve'ibdum, and they destroyed them. Be'esrim v'chamisha b'Kislev haya, the ultimate victory was on the 25th day of Kislev. V'nichdesu lahechel, and the Yidden came into the Beis HaMikdash, v'lo matzu shemen tahar b'mikdash, but they were unable to find shemen zayis that was tahar in the Beis HaMikdash with which to light the menorah. Ela pach echad, they were only able to find one vial of tahar shemen zayis, shayomunach b'chaysamay shel kain gadol, that was put away with the seal of the kain gadol. And it only had enough oil to burn for one day. But a miracle occurred, and they were able to light the menorah from that one flask for 8 days. Until they were able to crush new olives and to produce new shemen tahar. Because of this, the Chachamim of that generation passed a decree that those days, which begin with the 25th day of Kislev, should be Yemei Simcha v'Halel, days of rejoicing and days of reciting Hallel. And we light neros in the evening by the doors of our homes, on each one of these 8 nights that begin with the 25th day of Kislev, to show off and to spread knowledge of this nes. And this is a mitzvah d'Rabbanan to light these neros, Kikriyas HaMegillah, like the reading of Megillas Esther on Purim. V'yamim elu hein hanikra Chanukah, and these 8 days are what's known as Chanukah. Writes Aloymar, with the word Chanukah, what we wish to say is Chanu Chaf Hey. It's a contraction of Chanu, they rested, Chaf Hey, on the 25th. Shebiyom Chaf Hey, because on the 25th day of Kislev, Chanu me oivehem, Klal Yisrael rested from the oppression of their enemies. And because these are days of rejoicing and reciting Hallel, therefore they are prohibited in hesped. We're not maspid, we don't eulogize a mace, nor do we fast for any reason. There's a custom that the aniyim go out to collect money, especially on Chanukah, and there is a reason for this, and we'll see it momentarily in the Dirshu footnote. But just to sum up what the Chavetz Chaim says over here, it's what's well known to us, Baruch Hashem, by now, and that is that we were oppressed greatly by the Yevanim. And what the Yevanim wanted from us, the Yevanim didn't want to wipe us out. What the Yevanim wanted was they wanted us to give up Torah u'mitzvahs. They wanted us to give up Yiddishkeit. And it's important to realize that the reason the Yevanim wanted us to give up Yiddishkeit is because they held that they were much more enlightened and much more sophisticated than we were. We were primitive. We were keeping this primitive religion. So they came to us, so to speak, von Gutens. They came to us that they want to better our lot. And of course, in order to better our lot, they were going to force down our throats that we should give up our chas v'chalila primitive religion and we should follow their enlightened, cultured way. Sound familiar? It's what very much goes on nowadays in many, many quarters. Unfortunately, side by Yidden and side by non-Jews. We have Yidden, unfortunately. We have secularized Yidden who hold that they are enlightened and they are cultured and they want to look down at these from Yidden that keep these primitive ideas and have these big families and have all of these primitive, strange customs that they do, and they worry about eating kosher and 2 sinks and this and that they want to uplift us. They want us to live according to their enlightened lifestyle. Or by the non-Jews. We have the same thing by the non-Jews who want to come, let's say, and do away with bris milah. What kind of thing is this? You're going to go mutilate an 8-day-old child? So they want us to live according to their enlightened way of life. Let's take a look at their enlightened way of life and let's see where it goes. right? For some reason, they don't realize that our primitive lifestyle doesn't lead to drug use and alcohol abuse and spousal abuse and suicide and piercings and tattoos and everything else. For some reason, our primitive lifestyle doesn't lead to all of this, while their enlightened lifestyle does. But they come with they want to help us. They want to uplift us. They want to make us better. And that's what the Yevanim wanted. Baruch Hashem, along came the Chashmonaim, and the Chashmonaim stood fast, and they stood against incredible odds, impossible odds, and they went to war against the Yevanim in order to protect the Torah way of life, because they realized that there is no Klal Yisrael, there's no Yiddish life without Torah. It doesn't matter that they're not pointing a gun at your head. If they're pointing a gun at the Gemara, it's the same thing as if they're pointing a gun at your head. So the Chashmonaim came and they stood fast, and the Rebbeinu Shalom made nisim, and they overpowered, right? Rabbim miad ma'atim. The Rebbeinu Shalom gave over the Rabbim, the powerful, the might of the Greek military. The Rebbeinu Shalom gave them into the hands of the few and of the weak, and we were able to be victorious over them. We came to the Beis Hamikdash. We couldn't find a pach of. We only found one pach of shemen, one small flask of shemen that was enough to burn in the menorah for one day. But miraculously, it burnt for 8 days, and that's why we have this Yom Tov of Chanukah that begins on the 25th day of Kislev, and the ikar part of the mitzvah of Chanukah that we keep is the hadlakas neris to commemorate the nace of the menorah. I don't remember the source for it. I always forget the source, but I remember hearing what's pshat that there was a pach of shemen that had the choisam of the Kohen Gadol. Was that the minig that the Kohen Gadol himself signed every single flask of oil? It doesn't really seem to make sense that the choisam of the Kohen Gadol would be on every single flask or vial of shemen. So I remember hearing that many generations before Chanukah, what happened was they took in a delivery of Shemen Zayis, and they were pouring the Shemen Zayis over into the vials. Each vial was made to hold enough oil for one day. So they were pouring over the Shemen into these individual daily vials, and they came to one vial, they poured in enough for one day, and the vial didn't fill up. So they poured in more. It went for a second day. It still didn't fill up. They poured in for a third day. It still didn't fill up. And this vial, which was made to hold enough Shemen Zayis for one day, did not fill up until they poured in enough Shemen for 8 days. So they were stuck with a vial of Shemen over here that was clearly a miraculous pach of Shemen. They didn't know what to do with it. So they brought it to the Kohen Gadol and they asked the Kohen Gadol what to do. The Kohen Gadol said, obviously this pach shemen is going to be needed at some time in the future. He put his personal seal, he put his chaysam on that pach, and he instructed them to hide it. And that's why this pach of shemen was not made tameh by the Yevanim, because it was hidden. And when they went searching the precincts of the Beis Hamikdash for shemen, they found this pach. And this pach had enough shemen to burn for 8 days. Now, the Mishnah Berurah said that on Chanukah the Aniyim go around to collect tzedakah. If you take a look at Dirshu footnote 11, he brings down the reason for this as well as the source of the minig of Chanukah gelt. Says the footnote here, Ubetama davar, as far as the reason why the Aniyim collect tzedakah specifically on Chanukah, Kasav HaPri Megadim, the Pri Megadim writes in the Eshel of Ram, Shahayavanim bitlu es Yisrael bishloishes amudei ha'olam. It's a beautiful Pri Megadim that the Yevanim tried to be mavatalas from practicing the mitzvahs that are the 3 pillars that hold up the world: Torah, va'avoda, ugemilas chasadim. Umipnei zeh, and because of this, anu b'chiyavim b'Chanukah lilmod Torah. We have to learn Torah on Chanukah because the Yevanim tried to be mavatal Torah. Va'avoda b'leiv zu tefillah v'ayda. They wanted to be mavatal tefillah. So on Chanukah, I have to go a little easier on my voice. So on Chanukah, we have to be very nizhar in tefillah and in hoidah, like Hallel, or gemilas chasadim, and we also have to pay attention to practice Gemilas Chasadim b'mamain, with our money, so we have to give tzedakah, ubeguf, and with our bodies. That would mean going to be mevaka chayla, going to be menachem avelim, or to be mesameach chasav v'kala, etc., etc. Ubetam haminig lechalek liyaladim ma'is Chanukah. And as far as the source of Chanukah gelt, Bir Agayin Rabbi Yosef Shalom Kahanamin Shayavanim Hare Asru Lilmaid Torah. Like we said, the Yavanim wanted to be mavatalas from learning Torah. When we were victorious over the Yavanim, Nasnu liyaladim ma'at kesef, the Kinderlach got out of the habit of learning Torah. So now we were victorious over the Yavanim. We want the kids to start learning Torah again. So kishenatzcham nasdu layaladim ma'at kesef, they would give the children money kedei lahachziram lelimud HaTorah, to bring them back to limud HaTorah as an incentive. Ki zu haderech lechabev al yaladim es halimud, because this is a way to get the children to enjoy learning Torah. Like the Gra writes in the Igeres Agra, how do you get the kids to enjoy learning Torah? First, you have to incentivize it. Give them money. Give them money. Give them prizes. You incentivize it, then they go to learn Torah, then they taste the Tam Shel Torah, and they come to love it. And as a remembrance for this, that's why we give Chanukah geld, so that we should incentivize the children to learn Torah. Okay. Now we go back to the Mechaber. So the Mechaber said, and therefore says the Mechaber, the days of Chanukah, you're prohibited to eulogize, you're not allowed to make hespedim on a mace, V'tainis, and you're not allowed to fast. Says the Mishnah Berurah, cut beis v'asurim behesped v'tainis ayin lekabon sibit tafresh peivav sif aleph b'Mishnah Berurah, where the Mishnah Berurah is going to discuss the question of hesped and tainis on the day before Chanukah and the day after Chanukah. Weiter in the Mechaber, aval mutarin ba'asiyas belacha. However, there is no iser malacha on Chanukah. Having said that, the Mechaber qualifies it, and he says, the women have a custom not to perform malacha while the neros Chanukah are still burning. And there are those that say that this should not be treated leniently. We should not be makel for them and tell them it's okay, you could do malacha. Says the Mishnah Berurah Gimel Hanoshim. This is a minig by the women. Dafka noshim, only by the women, says the Chavetz Chaim. Why? Because one of the great nisim of Chanukah took place through the agency of a woman. Like we're going to see Mi'etz Hashem shortly in the words of the Ramah. This is a reference to the nes of Yehudis, Bas Yochanan Kohen Gadol. And therefore, now this is very interesting. I think a lot of people are aware of the minig that Nashim don't do malacha while the neros are burning, and they're aware that the reason is because there was a nes that happened through women because of the nes of Yehudis. But they don't know what pshat is. They think that pshat is, since a nes happened through a woman, so women have a prohibition to do malacha, they have an isser malacha. No. Pshat is, we know that you're not allowed to be mishtamish la'ira of the menorah. You're not allowed to use the light of the Chanukah licht, right? You're not allowed to go read by the light of the Chanukah licht. That's why we have a shamish. We have an extra candle, so that if we do derive benefit from the lights of the menorah, we're not benefiting from the Chanukah licht themselves, we're benefiting from the shamish. The shamish is the one candle that doesn't have kedusha in it. It's not the ner shel mitzvah. It's the other candles that are the ner shel mitzvah. Now that halacha applies to men and women equally. However, since there was a nes of Chanukah that took place through a woman, because of that, women are extra nizhar in the isurim of Chanukah. And since there's an isur of Chanukah that you're not allowed to be mishtamish la'oira, the women had a minig that while the neros Chanukah were burning, they didn't do any malacha to remember the Isser to be Mishtamish La'ira. Now, even though the Isser to be Mishtamish La'ira applies equally to men and women, women take the Isurim of Chanukah more seriously. They're more Nizar, they're more Zariz in the Isurim of Chanukah. Why? Because there was a nace that came al Yodam. That's what comes out from the Achrayim. Continues the Mishnah Berurah, indeed, there are places where men are also nizar in this, because again, the Isser to be mishtamish la'ira applies to men too. While the neris are burning, says the Mishnah Berurah, this means bevesai. This means while the Chanukah licht are burning in their house. What is this coming la'afuke? This is coming la'afuke, what's brought down in a Magen Avram, that there was a minig not for the women not to do malacha as long as the neros were burning in the Beis HaKnesses. And that was a lot longer. Now here is where we see in the Mishnah Berurah what I just told you before. Why did they have this minig not to do malacha while the neros were burning? Kedei lahakir she'aser lehishtamesh la'oira. To make a heker to the Isser that you're not allowed to be mishtamish by the or of the menorah. That's what this was based on. Now, very important 3 words in the Mishnah Berurah, the next 3 words. What does this mean that the minig is as long as the neros are burning in your house? For who? Kachatzi shah, which means approximately for a half an hour. What that seems to mean is, it doesn't mean that if you have very large cups on your menorah, that your wife can't do malacha for 4 hours because your menorah is burning for 4 hours. No, it means the zman achiyuv. When you light your menorah burns, has to burn for the mitzvah for approximately a half an hour. So for that time, the women don't do malacha. If you have neros that burn longer than that, they can still do malacha while it's burning. There are those that say that we should not be makel for the women. Isser, this has the status of something that's really me'ikar adin mutter, but there are people that are noyig in Isser, shehin la'ater b'fneim. As long as it's not a shtus, it's something that does have a basis, so even though me'ikar adin it is mutter, but since there is a halachic basis for it, we're not makel for them. The concept of Shilti Gibarim, the Shilti Gibarim writes, in places where they had a minig not to do malacha all day, that you should protest against, because batala is an avera. It brings people to all sorts of shtuyot. For people to sit around and do nothing is not a good thing. So to have an Isser Asiyas Malacha on Chanukah while the neros are burning, that's one thing. But to go prob an Isser Malacha all day, that already is something that could become problematic. And therefore, it says that if places have such a minig, it would be kedai to be moicha against such a minig. Hopefully a little lubrication in the throat will help. Okay. Now we go to Sif Beis. Says the Mechaber, Riboy ha'su'udai shemarba bahem heim su'udais harishus. When people make su'udais on Chanukah, says the Mechaber, you should know that there is no mitzvah of suda on Chanukah. If you're marbis sudais on Chanukah, it's a rishus. It's optional. Shaloi kiva'um lemishte v'simcha, because Chazal were not kaiveya the days of Chanukah to be days of mishte and simcha. Says the Mishnah is Vav. Shaloi kiva'um lemishte v'simcha ela lahalal lahoidos. The Chazal were kaiveya Chanukah as days for Hallel, as days for reciting Hallel, and ulahoidos, and to give praise and to thank the Rabbeinu Shalom for our salvation. But they did not establish the days of Chanukah as days of Mishteh and Simcha, of physical rejoicing. V'nera hatam deloi kavukan l'simcha kamay b'purim, and the Chavetz Chaim says it would seem that the reason why Chanukah was not established as days of Simcha the way Purim was, ki b'purim haya gzeira lahashmid v'lahareges hagufais, because on Purim, Haman, Achashverosh, they wanted to physically wipe us off the face of the earth. They wanted to kill us out. Shehu bittul mishta v'simcha. Now, that's a physical destruction, which would prevent physical mishta and simcha. V'loyas hanafashos. They really didn't want to wipe out our nefesh, our neshama. In other words, they were going after us on a physical level. They wanted to kill us out. But they weren't going after us on a spiritual level. Sha'afilu himiru dasam chas v'shalom. Even if the Yidden would have come along and they would have said, oh, we give up Yiddishkeit, we'll become great practicing pagan citizens, chas v'chalila, they wouldn't have accepted it. They could care less about our religion, and if we're practicing our religion, if we're learning Torah, Haman Achashverosh, they couldn't care less. They just wanted to wipe us out. Lakach, therefore, kishitzila b'kadosh baruch hu mimenu, when the Rebbeinu Shalom saved us from them, kavu lahalaloyu l'shabecha yisparach gamkein al yedei mishta v'simcha. So the Chazal were kaveya that we should thank the Rebbeinu Shalom on a physical level. We should use taka mishta v'simcha. Mashe'ekein b'maised Antiochus. That's to contrast that to Antiochus in the times of Chanukah. Shloi gazer aleim laharig lahashmid. Antiochus wasn't being geyser to wipe us out physically. Rak tsarois ushmadois kidei lahamir dasam. What he wanted to do was to pass gezeros to wipe out our religion. He was after Yiddishkeit. Kamoshan oibrim, like we say in Alanisim, laashkicham tarasecho laavira me'achuker ritzanecha. If we would have agreed to bend to their will, to humble ourselves before them, to pay them taxes, and to pick up their culture and their faith, they weren't out for anything more than that. They would have been fine with it. They would have let us go. So they were attacking us on a spiritual level. But the Rebbeinu Shalom empowered us and made us victorious over them. Therefore, on Chanukah, the Chazal were kiveya that we should celebrate Chanukah on a spiritual level. Since they wanted to block us from things of a spiritual nature, lichbar b'dasai, to be kaifrim in our religion, chas v'shalom, ube'ezrasa yisparach layefikuz mamam, and through the Rebbeinu Shalom's assistance, they were not able to fulfill their schemes and their dreams. V'gavra yadeinu, and our hands were strengthened. Lakachanu ma'idum u'mishabchim alai al shahayalanu le'lekim v'lai azavuna me'avaydasai. Therefore, we give Haidah and Shevach to the Rebbeinu Shalom, that the Rebbeinu Shalom is our Elohim. We celebrate this on a spiritual plane, with Lahalel, Lahaidos, with learning Torah, but not with Mishta v'Simcha. Now we go to the Ramah, bottom line. Hagav v'yeshayim, those that say, Sheyesh k'tzas mitzvah b'riba yasudais, that there is somewhat of a mitzvah to be mar besuda. Why? Because there's another thing that we're celebrating on Chanukah. The word Chanukah, we said earlier, is a contraction of Chanu Chafhei. Now that is to celebrate the miracles of Chanukah, of the victory over the Yevanim and the nace of the Neres Chanukah. But there's a whole other piece to Chanukah, and that is the Chanukas HaMizbeach, the inauguration of the Mizbeach, as we're going to see, both in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu of the Mishkan, and as well as the rededication, the re-Chanukas Habayis of Bayis Sheni at the time of Chanukah. Explains the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Zayin, De Ba'ois Anayamin, Ritzayna Loima Be'esrim V'chamisha B'Kislev. On the 25th of Kislev, there was a Chanukas HaMizbeach of the Mishkan in the Midbar. What does that mean? Kedisa b'Medrash, like it's brought down in the Medrash Psikta Rabbasi, the Meleches HaMishkan Nikbar Be'esrim V'chamisha B'Kislev. The work of the Mishkan was completed on the 25th day of Kislev. Now, we know that Moshe Rabbeinu erected the Mishkan for the first time on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So what's pshat that the work was finished on the 25th day of Kislev, and then there was a 5-day gap until the Mishkan was erected? What's pshat? Elo shehimten HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'hakama ad Nisan shenoilad ba Yitzchak. The erection of the Mishkan was delayed until Rosh Chodesh Nisan, because those of us who learned Daf Yomi just had it not all that long ago in Masechtas Rosh Hashanah, in Nisan, Yitzchak Avinu was born. And the Rebbe Shalom wanted to wait until the month that Yitzchak Avinu was born. V'amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but the Rebbe Shalom said, Alai l'shalim l'Kislev, I have to pay Kislev back. Kislev has a taina. Kislev says, look, the Malachas HaMishkan was finished in my month. And really, the Mishkan should have been erected in my month, and you took it away from me. You gave it to Rosh Chodesh Nisan instead. I said 5 days before. That was a misnomer. I misspoke. It's a lot more than 5 days from Chafei Kislev until Rosh Chodesh Nisan. I was thinking 25th and Rosh Chodesh, but it's Kislev and it's Nisan. So Kislev had a taina. Kislev said, you owe me one. So the Rebbe Shalom said, V'shilam loy Chanukah beis chashbanoi. The payback was that Kislev got the rededication of the Beis Hamikdash of Bayis Sheni in the days of Chanukah. The Gam Sham b'mei HaTioches, Timu HaHechel, v'asu Chanukah's Abayis b'shmoni yamim elu. Okay, let's go weiter. Top of Kuf Lamed Ches Amud Aleph. Continues the Ramah. V'nayhagin loy maris mirois v'sishpachais pasudois shemarbim bahem. So again, the Mechaber said any ribui of Seudais on Chanukah is a Rishus. The Ramah said there are those that say that there is Ktsas mitzvah to be marbe besuda on Chanukah to celebrate the Chanukah Samizbeach. Now says the Ramah, v'nayhagid loymar zmirais v'sishpachais pasudois shemarbe bahem. But you should sing zmirais and tishpachais by those sudais. Va'oz heavy sudas mitzvah, and then it becomes a sudas mitzvah. Says the Mishnah Berurah zmirais, you should sing zmirais v'sishpachais. First, the Chavetz Chaim makes a tangential point. V'hu adin b'nesuyei bas Talmid Chacham la'amoretz. The Gemara says that when the daughter of a Talmid Chacham marries an amoretz, it's not really a sudas mitzvah. But im oimrim shirais, but if they sing shirais v'sishpachais to the Rebbeinu Shalom, then heavy sudas mitzvahs. Ois cut test, va'oz heavy sudas mitzvah. If you sing shirais v'sishpachais to the Rebbeinu Shalom when you're marba b'suda on Chanukah, then it becomes a sudas mitzvah. Says the Chavetz Chaim, what the Ramah wants to say is, b'tziru fizeh. We're combining two factors that the Ramah just said. The Mechaber said that any ribui suda is only a rishus. The Ramah said, yesh mi sha'omer, that there is ktsas mitzvah. Says the Ramah, when does it become a sudas mitzvah? According to the shittas that hold that there is somewhat of a mitzvah to be marbe suda on Chanukah because of Chanukah's mizbeach, if you sing zmiros v'shishpachos, then it becomes a sudas mitzvah. It's a tziruf of both factors. The kein pasku harashal v'habach kayesh oibim. The cause of harashal, the Marshal writes, shekol she'oisik k'dei litei shevach l'mokaim or lefarsem anes or a mitzvah. Whatever we do that is in order to give praise to the Rebbeinu Shalom, or to be mefarsim the nes of Chanukah, to make more well known, to publicize the nes of Chanukah or the mitzvah, hakol sudas mitzvah, automatically it's a sudas mitzvah. Weiter in the Ramah. Yesh Arimim, second line down, middle of the line. Yesh Arimim, there are those that say sheyesh lechel gvina b'Chanukah, that there's an Inyan to eat cheese on Chanukah. Levisha anes nasa b'cholav, because a nes occurred through milchiks. She'achila Yehudis es ha'oyev, because Yehudis pas Yochanan Kohen Gadol served the Greek general milchika, dairy foods that made him sleepy. Says the Mishnah Berurah, she'achila Yehudis, Ais kat yud. He haisa bita shel Yochanan Kohen Gadol. This Yehudis was the daughter of Yochanan Kohen Gadol. V'haisa gzera. There was a decree of the Greeks. Shekal arusa tibayel ala tafsar tchila, that any woman who was an arusa, engaged, even though erusin in the the vernacular of Chazal, we know that Yiddish marriage has two stages, Kiddushin and Nisuin. So Arusa is somebody who's already had Kiddushin. A real Arusa is totally married. She's an Ashes Ish. When we talk about being engaged, an engaged woman is not an Ashes Ish. But there was a Gzera that a woman who was about to be married, Tiboil Latafsar Tchila, she would have to go and have relations with the noble first. The noble got the woman before the husband did. And Yehudis went, she was, so to speak, an Arusa, and she was being taken to the Tafsar, so she made it look like she was going willingly, and she made a feast for this person, and she fed him milchige food that made him sleepy, and he fell asleep. She gave him dairy foods that made him thirsty, and then she made him drunk. She cut off his head, and then all of the Greeks ran. They saw that their mighty general was killed. They all ran. Okay. Let's try to push through to the end of the Siman. Siv Gimel. Ein maspidin bahem. You're not allowed to be maspid a mace on Chanukah. Elo lechacham befanav. Only for a Talmid Chacham of note. Befanav, while he is mutal befanav, in front of the mace. If the mace is a Talmid Chacham of note, then you could be maspid him if he is actually there, if the mace is actually there on Chanukah. Says the Ramah Hagav, the Ein Mis'adin Yom Shemes by of Ayim. We don't fast even for a yahrzeit for a father or for a mother on Chanukah. For Tanis Chaloim b'Chanukah, as far as a Tanis Chaloim, somebody had a dream and he wants to have a Tanis Chaloim in order to be mavatal the dream. Ein La'el Siman Tavkov Samaches Sif Hey. Or Le'inyan Tziduk Adin, as far as saying the tefillah that's known as Tziduk Adin. These are psukim that we say over in the Beis HaKvaris, in the Beis Olam, before we make the Kfura on a mace. We say psukim that speak about the Tziduk Adin, how the Rabbeinu Shalom's mishpat is just. So as far as saying Tziduk Adin on Chanukah, Ein Le'el B'Hilchos Rosh Chodesh Siman Tav Chaf Ba'Agav, Ein L'Kaman Siman Tav Reish Pei Gimel. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting on Aleph. The Ein Mis'anin, we don't fast, Kanal Sif Aleph. Like we said in Sif Aleph, the Mechaber said we're not allowed to fast on Chanukah. Says the Ramah here, even for a yahrzeit. V'hem avar v'his'ana yom shemes by other the imay. If somebody transgressed this halacha and he did fast on the day of a yahrzeit of a parent, or tanis chaloim, or he fasted a tanis chaloim, tzarich lamesav tanis l'tani, say he has to keep another tanis to gain kapara for the tanis that he kept on Chanukah. This is similar to what we've seen on Shabbos. Somebody keeps a tanis chaloim on Shabbos, he has to keep another tanis to get kapara for that tanis. V'ayim b'derech hachayim asher kasav bazeh. Ois cut yud beis. Ayin le'el b'hilchos rosh chodesh. When it comes to the question of tziduk adin, shesham kasav, over there we learned she'ein omer b'yom she'ein omer by tachdun. We never say tziduk adin on a day that we don't say tachdun. V'chei l'kamon b'sibit tafresh pei gimel ayin sham. Aval lefteim ula'achreim. As far as the day before Chanukah or the day after Chanukah, nera de'en lahachmer le'inin tziduk adin. We don't have to be machmer when it comes to tziduk adin. And we could say tziduk adin. Even when it comes to be maspid a mace, many are makel on the day before Chanukah and the day after Chanukah. Even if you want to be machmer, like those paiskim that say that you cannot be maspid on the day before Chanukah, and therefore you don't want to say tziduk adin either on the day before Chanukah, like those paiskim. Al kalpanim, nevertheless, la'achareim, for the day after Chanukah, pavadai ein lahachmer, there's no reason to be machmer v'yuchal loymer tziduk adin. V'chein kasav ha'pri begadim. Avelus l'kulei alma noyeg b'Chanukah. Avelus is noyeg on Chanukah. Einain, somebody who lost a relative that he's chayiv to be misabel for on the day of the Tira before the Kfura, he's known as an Einain. And we know an Einain is patur min ha-mitzvahs. So Einain patur min ha-Chanukah. The Kasav El Yerabba, the El Yerabba writes to Ishtoi Tadlik, that his wife should light in the house instead of him. V'emu mutalanis amen, as far as whether or not he could say amen, yesh deis papaiskim. Ayin b'yardei simin shin mem aleph. V'nera, and it would seem if he's alone in the house, he doesn't have a wife with him in the house, yadlik haneris lefarsume nisa, he should light the neris to publicize the nes of Chanukah, aber ubeloi bracha, without making a bracha. Cherish she'ena shemei v'hu medaber, a cherish who's deaf, he cannot speak. I'm sorry, he cannot hear. V'hu medaber, but he can speak. Chayiv b'ner Chanukah, he's chayiv b'ner Chanukah to keep pikach l'chol dvarav, because a cherish who is deaf but who can speak is considered a pikach l'chol dvarav, and therefore he is fully chayiv in the mitzvahs, and he's chayiv in the mitzvah of neris Chanukah. Okay, so Baruch Hashem, we were able to push through most of an extra page, and it's beautiful to start Hilchos Chanukah. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be Megan Agans Klal Yisrael. The Rabbi Hashem should send Yeshuas, Refuas, Parnasa, Shaduchim to all those in need. We should be zeichet to see the BS Tzedek b'meher v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.